Hello everyone, this is Ian Robinson with Creative 111 coming back at you with some more Sapphire Effects training. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Stylize effects. Now the Stylize effects cross a wide range of styles. So in this video, we have a number of compositions we're going to go through to show you a smattering of all the different things that we can go ahead and apply. So the first thing I'll do is go to my project panel, and in the underscore comps folder, you can see I have 12 comps. So I'll start with the 01 film effect intro composition. Notice it's one video layer, and if I toggle that off and on, it's just created a little bit more style for this individual effect. If you want to see what this effect specifically is, you can select the layer and press E, and this is the S film effect. As I show you each of these different comps, there are going to be different effects. But before we do that, let me go ahead and just drag my Effects and Presets panel just to the right side of the Composition panel. And that way, when I search for S underscore, you can see all the different Sapphire effects, and I'll just collapse all the different groups except for Sapphire Stylize. And as you can see, there are a ton of Stylize effects. Now, I'm going to drag the Libraries tab behind the Preview tab and just bring Preview to the front, just so we aren't seeing the Libraries tab. Let's look at some other things we'll be creating. I'll choose Film Effect with Vignette, and here you can see if I toggle the effect off and on, I've created a much more soft and subtle kind of Instagram styled look. If we do Pixel, Sculpt, and Edge Detect, you can see I've got a really kind of neat retro futuristic look. Let's do the Pixel Sort Edge Detect with Ultra Glow. Check that out. If I turn that off and on, you can see that's the original footage. And then this is the over-the-top Stylize that we created using multiple effects. If I select layer 1 and press E, you can see it's got a ton of different effects that have been layered on there. One more, we'll go to Kaleido Transition. If I double click that composition and scrub with my current time indicator back to the beginning, you can see I get this really cool, interesting effect that transitions into our video clip. If I toggle the effect off and on, you can see exactly what we've got going on here. Before I dive into the specifics of each one of these comps, I'm just going to open the Aerials folder, and I'll drag this video clip to the New Composition button, and that'll create a new comp that'll match those video settings. So with that layer selected in the timeline, I just want to show you some of the different presets that we have available. The first one, Auto Paint. So I'll drag that right onto the project here, and it doesn't really look like a car, but it is automatically painting in different styles. So if I go to the style here, I can click on the drop down. I've got Van Gogh, I've got Harry Paint and Pointilize, which is fun. But this is just moving through the settings. If I go to Load Preset up here, you can see I've got several different presets that I could choose from. So I'll just click through some of them so you can kind of see. My personal favorite is this one here called Surf Bunny. I think it creates a really kind of cool look. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Load. And now if I scrub through the video clip here, you can see I've got this really cool effect that's been applied just by using Auto Paint and using one of the presets. There are a ton of presets for all of these different styles. So please feel free to apply an effect and browse the presets by going to Load Preset. I'm going to go ahead and close that composition and go back to the 01 Film Effect Intro comp. This one is pretty straightforward. If I select the video layer, you can see the S Film Effect was applied. If I drag that and drop it, that was how it was applied. I'll go ahead and just choose Load Preset so we can look at some of the different presets. You can see there are several in this instance. So if I choose something like French Dawn, it gives me a really nice sort of soft look. It's really low contrast and the black levels are up, so it's really kind of a neat, interesting look. There are several different presets that can kind of take you in all different directions, But I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel because I want to take you through some of the settings of the film effect. Just like any of the other sapphire effects, things people adjust most often towards the top. So if I go to negative film here, you can see I've got a different film preset. And what's cool is I could actually choose a different preset for the film negative and a different preset for the print film itself. Now, I don't like what I've done to make those changes, so I'll just undo until we get back to kind of what we had before. And then in here, I've got blur input. Well, if I scrub on that, you can see I can actually blur this out. And if I animated this, I could create a really kind of cool rack focus effect. I could color correct. I could adjust different things like the scale of the color correction. Okay, here I could really kind of make it a neat warm look if I wanted to. I'll just undo that. I could adjust the input gamma, brighten the scene up a little bit or darken it down just by scrubbing. One of the most common things I tell anyone who's getting started in After Effects, if you're not sure what something does, just scrub on the parameter. And I do that whether I'm doing something really advanced or really beginner. It just does a really good job of giving you a good preview as to what things could potentially look like. That's the film effect. Of course, I could go ahead and load a preset, but let's move on to film effect with vignette. With that composition selected, I'll go ahead and select my video layer here, and you can see I've got film effect and a vignette applied. So if I toggle the vignette off and on, you can see the vignette is very soft, but it's helped me create that overall look. So again, just dragging one effect and then dragging another effect right on top of it. If I open up those options here, I can see all of those different settings that I could go ahead and change if I want to change how drastic this vignette is going to be just by scrubbing the radius like so. Film effect versus film damage. If I select my video layer here, you notice I have film effect and I have film damage. Now, if I open up my film effect here, you can see I've got a negative and positive film. We did make some adjustments to the color correction. If I toggle that off and on, you can see it's pretty drastic. If I toggle off the film damage, notice just how clean this footage actually looks. If I scrub through, there's definitely a little bit of grain in there, but there aren't any scratches or rolls like what's happening with film damage. So a lot of times what I'll do when I'm trying to create a stylized look is I'll apply the film effect to create the overall color correction style to it. And then I'll apply a little bit of film damage to actually add more grit and life to the clip. I'm going to go back to the project panel here and open up Pixel Sort Begin. This is kind of cool. If I select layer 1 and press E to open up the effects, you can see I've got pixel sort here and a bunch of keyframes. So if I press the U key, that'll open up any animated parameters. And you'll notice here, we have the circle center animated. So the position of the circle center moves. You can see that with this icon here. So as we move through, you can see it's actually creating this really cool swirl effect that appears to be following the hand. It's just keyframed along that hand. And then we have the start angle, the degrees sorted, and the circle center. The inner radius, if you notice, it's not animated until we get to the next section here. And notice as we increase the radius, then we actually start to get a little bit more of an open area in that pixel sort. So pixel sort kind of takes individual pixels and then starts to rip them apart to kind of sort them out, if you will. And in this instance, we're actually sorting these out in a circular fashion. If I select the layer here and go to my effect controls, you can see all of the different parameters that we could go ahead and adjust. I just revealed the animated parameters, but we could adjust something like the thickness. So the thickness is the overarching scale of how the The thickness is the overarching scale of the pixel sort effect. Let's go back to the project panel, and I want to open Pixel Sort Sculpt and Edge Detect. This is really cool because if you notice in my project, I have an actual Cinema 4D layer that, if we go to the effect controls, is rendering 3D using the Cineware plugin. Now, since I have a full version of Cinema 4D, that's how that's actually working. But if I just used the Cinema 4D Lite that's built into my After Effects, I could use that as well. So notice I've got a hue saturation that's been applied. I'll just turn all of these effects off so you can see the initial effect that we have here. This is just for this individual sculpt layer. I have a hue saturation adjustment, a levels adjustment, which kind of brought it up to white. And then I have the edge detect, which is really cool because it's detecting the edges of a three-dimensional object, which is pretty awesome. If I open that up here, it's using RGB edges, but it's really kind of doing a great job of detecting that. If I go to edge colorize, I can open up those options here. I'm rotating the colors. So as you can see, that actually is an expression. This is quite a long expression, but basically it's kind of linked to the pixel aspect width and the comp height. So it's really kind of a neat little expression. Let me go ahead and close that. If I turn that off, you notice I have an adjustment layer here, which I can turn off and on. And the way this adjustment layer is working is I've actually got pixel sort applied here. And if I press M to reveal a mask, you can see I've got a mask, so it's only sorting the pixels on the right-hand side here. I knew that effect was masked because of this icon here, but this is really kind of created a cool effect just by applying the pixel sort effect with the mask. So I'll go ahead and just turn that off. This is an adjustment layer. So it was pixel sorting the layer below, which is this sculpt example layer. So in here we have the hue, saturation, and levels. And then finally, underneath all of that, we have a shape layer, which if I toggle that off and on, you can see it's the full size of the composition. And if I press UU to reveal any changed parameters here, you can see it has a gradient fill set to radiant. If I turn all these layers on and scrub through, you can actually see I've got the head rotating with some cool lines drawn around the outside of it. It's just created a really neat stylized look. Let's go to pixel sort and digital damage effect. This is really cool because look at what I've got here. I have an adjustment layer and another adjustment layer. These adjustment layers are being used as transitional elements for the actual scene itself. So if I move my current time indicator back to the beginning of the project, notice I've got damage that's actually been applied. If I select the layer and go to my effect controls here, you can see there's my digital damage, and the opacity is just set up at 100. So I've got damage in the scene, and then once it gets past that adjustment layer, now we're just into the pixel sort. So if I select the background video layer here, you can see I've got my pixel sort applied. How is pixel sort working? Well, here, let me collapse Mocha, and I want you to notice the threshold. This threshold has been animated. So if I press the U key, you can see the animation. And in fact, it just has one keyframe. So if I go ahead and move through, you notice it hasn't really changed anything. It's just allowed me to keyframe that threshold at one individual setting. How do I want it to sort? Well, I could have it randomly restart the sort, which is how I'm getting that noise there. If I want to see the expression, I can go ahead and press UU. And if we scroll down here, you can see I've got a wiggle effect that is adjusting the sort direction of the pixel sort. I also have another wiggle effect on the randomly restart sort effect. So just to load up a couple frames, I'll move my current time indicator back in the timeline and just press the space bar here. And you can see I've got tons of noise and wiggle with my damage that's been applied to this individual layer. So film damage. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the timeline here to where I actually have some damage applied, and I'll select layer 6 and turn off the pixel sort for the time being. I just want to focus on the film damage. The film damage is being applied procedurally, meaning it's not referencing any other graphic elements or anything. It is computing how all of these pixels are creating the different damage effects. So if I select that layer here under digital damage, you can see I can change the damage size, the size relative X. I can freeze it and adjust the threshold, saturation, quality. You get the general idea. All of this is actually being computed within the Sapphire effect, and it's being rendered as the effect is happening. So it's not referencing any sort of bitmapped image. The advantage of that is you can apply this on really large film raster projects, like even 32K. So this will do it. Let's actually take a look at some glitch looks. I'm going to jump back to the 04 pixel sort begin project. So within the pixel sort itself, if I go to the effect controls here, I could choose what the effect is going to do. So if I want it to sort linearly, I could have it go across that way. If I want it to sort radially, it will actually radiate out. Or if I want it to go circular, it will work in a circular fashion. Now, when you are applying this effect, it's important that you pay attention to the threshold. If I bring the threshold down here, you can see it's barely applying the effect, if at all. When it's at 0, it's not really doing anything. I can actually go into the negative, but you can see it's really not doing too much in the negative. It's when I get into the positive that it actually starts sorting pixels. So I could have it really low setting if I just want to have a very tiny amount of the pixels sorted, and that would create a rather interesting look. Now, when these pixels are being sorted, there is one other thing you should check out, and that's the sort type. So right now, it's doing monochrome, where it's basically choosing the pixel color in a monochrome fashion based on the original pixel. But I could go ahead and say average that, or you know what, I want it to be red or green, or using the blue pixels. Since this is a rather monochrome image, it's not really going to change things too much. If I tell it to adjust based on saturation, you can see it's not really doing too much. But if I tell it to go based on brightness, it's going to start sorting with the brightest pixels first. Now, I'm going to go back to some more glitch effects in the 05 project. So we already noticed that it was actually adjusting with both 3D and 2D layers, but it is kind of a cheat in terms of how it's looking at those layers. It's looking at the 3D layer, but it's a 2D effect. So it's really kind of creating a neat 2D effect based on the 3D element. It's a little bit of a cheat. All right, we've covered quite a few of the glitch effects. Let's go on and look at some psychedelic effects. I'm going to open up the 09 Sketched Kaleido preset intro, and you'll notice I have two layers here. So I'll click and drag a lasso around both layers and press E to open up the effects. First thing you'll notice, I have an adjustment layer. If I open up that layer so we could see it, it's Kaleido example Allen. I can go ahead and just turn that off and on. So there's Allen. If I select layer 2 here, you could see I have key light, which means this was a green screen. And if I toggle that off and on, you can see the key that happened. And then the S Kaleido effect, which is really a cool effect. If I go to my effect controls here in the Kaleido, I could go to load presets. And as you can see, there are a ton of different presets. So crisscross is definitely a cool one. Cozy Passion, Carpenter's Lens. You get the general idea. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel because we already have the cool Kaleido effect that's being applied. So let's select the adjustment layer above it and turn that on and open up the S effect. And here in the S effect, there are glowing lines, Kaleido radial, a glow, a grid, bokeh lights, rotational grid. It's really kind of created a really neat look that we've actually applied to this psychedelic kind of style. Now, notice glowing lines right here. I can adjust the different settings to create a different style. Now, I'm going to go back into my project panel and go to the Kaleido transition, because you can use a kaleidoscope as a transition. So if I select layer 1 and press the U key to open any animated properties, notice here the Kaleido amount is at 1.390 to start, but then when I get to this frame here, 11 hours, 1 minute, 51 seconds, and 48 frames, you can see that I've got 0 Kaleido amount. So it's a really cool way to create an interesting transition. And again, a great way to start this off is with a preset. Now, in the next psychedelic example, I've got infinite zoom and Kaleido. So if I go back to the beginning here and just press the spacebar to load up a preview, it's going to load up those frames. But check this out. Notice they're kind of zooming out towards us. So if I just continue scrubbing here, you can see it's created this beautiful depth effect. So to see how that works, I'll select my infinite composition and open my effect controls. And here you can see I've got infinite zoom and the Kaleido effect. So here's the Kaleido effect. And then when infinite zoom is applied, if we open that up, you could see the zoom and rotation parameters are keyframed, but I have options for what's transparent and how the spiral is built. So this one is working in a counterclockwise fashion. If I chose clockwise, it's just going to wrap things in the opposite direction. Let's open up the last composition in the project. I'm going to go to the Project tab and double-click on the 12 Combining Kaleido Tiles and Edge Detect. In here, I've actually got an image sequence. And if I toggle the effects off, now if I scrub through, you'll notice I've got these geometric shapes that have been rendered out into an image sequence. So if I turn the effect on, you can see it looks a lot more dynamic. If I go to my effect controls, you can see I've got S Kaleido that's added here. That's the only effect that's on. But if I turn on TileScramble, it's going to create a little bit more jaggedness to the look. And if I turn on the edge detect, it's going to actually kind of glow around the edges of this. So it's doing subpixel smoothing. And here's the brightness set up at 1. I can increase the brightness even more, or I could decrease the brightness. But notice if I didn't have the TileScramble, you wouldn't have the neat texture that's actually been added into the scene. So the edge detect combined with the TileScramble gives me this neat look. And then of course the Kaleido on top of that is really kind of giving me that neat graphic build. If I just turn that off, you can see how this is working. TileScramble has kind of created this neat glass tile look. But when I add the edge detect over top of it, it's now looking a little more graphic. And then when we apply the Kaleido, it's even looking even more graphic. With Ultra Glow, it's really going to take things over the top because I've added a glow yet on top of that. So when it comes to stylizing footage inside of Sapphire Effects, layering effects are great. Starting with presets are great. Combining effects are great. Honestly, you really can't go wrong just playing around. The big thing you want to do with these effects is use them sort of like you'd be mixing paint on a paint palette.